For years, Russia's pipelines carried more than fuel. They carried influence, control, and the money that powers Putin's wars. For decades, Moscow's oil and gas flowed across the world, becoming one of its main tools of political pressure. Since the early 2000s, the Kremlin has used Gazprom to tighten its grip on the post-Soviet region and deepen Europe's dependence on Russian gas. But the energy war Moscow started against Europe has backfired. What was meant to make Russia stronger has exposed its weakness. How does Russian gas still reach Europe today? Why did Gazprom become the Kremlin's weapon of choice? And can the European Union finally cut itself off from Russian energy for good? Oil and gas have long been Russia's tools of power. The Kremlin used them to buy loyalty and silence, while Europe's most dependent nations often had to make compromises, economic and political, in return for cheap energy.
In the early 2000s, Russia embraced the idea of becoming an energy superpower. The logic was simple. With the continent's largest reserves of oil and gas, Moscow didn't need armies to project power. Discounts, embargoes, artificial shortages, or sudden surges in supply could achieve the same effect: political control. Energy became a weapon that let the Kremlin shape the internal politics of other countries. Inside Russia, this system created its own loyal class, people who got rich off gas discounts and shady deals, and then turned that money into new political projects.
In January 2025, a gas crisis hit the unrecognized region of Transnistria, a narrow strip of land along Ukraine's border that has been under Russian occupation since 1992. For decades, the Kremlin kept the local regime in Tiraspol afloat with free gas supplies that became the backbone of its economy. But this winter, Transnistria found itself on the brink of a humanitarian disaster. Gazprom halted gas transit through Ukraine after its contract with Naftogaz expired. That single move rattled Moldova's already fragile political balance. Until recently, the country itself depended on one contract, one pipeline from Russia, to keep the lights on.
In Transnistria sits the Moldovan power plant, the largest in all of Moldova. Most of the country's electricity came from it, and what was it running on? Gas supplied by Russia through Ukraine. Gas that Transnistria never paid for. The debt fell on Moldova, which ignored it too. A clear case of a system that worked for everyone. Political elites in both Moldova and unrecognized Transnistria were content to keep the scheme alive. Everyone knew the scheme was shady. Everyone condemned it in public, but no one changed a thing. It suited them all.
Gazprom's major pipelines, Nord Stream, South Stream, and Power of Siberia, were never just infrastructure. They were political weapons. Nord Stream 2 was the clearest example, giving Moscow leverage over Europe before its full-scale invasion of Ukraine. By 2022, Germany faced the consequences: a gas crisis after Russian supplies were cut.
There was an interesting investigation in northern Germany into how the infrastructure of Russian influence was built around the area where Nord Stream 2 comes ashore. There was a vast network, an entire ecosystem of financial flows centered around the local Russian house. In just one federal state, nearly 800 politicians were somehow tied to it, the entire regional elite, regardless of party affiliation. People with an economy-centered worldview, those who live for money and assume everyone else does too, simply couldn't comprehend a different kind of logic. Putin's logic is not about money. For him, the ultimate goal is greatness.
Since 2022, Russia has been waging an energy war against Europe. Moscow slashed gas supplies, tightening the valves on key routes, and even staging sabotage on Ukraine's gas transit system. Out of 4 major routes that once carried Russian gas into Europe, 3 are now shut down. The only line still alive is Turkstream, which keeps feeding Russian gas into the EU. At the same time, Russia continues shipping liquefied natural gas through a shadow fleet of tankers that quietly skirt sanctions. Countries like Hungary, France, and Belgium still buy Russian gas, which now makes up roughly 12% of Europe's imports.
The volume of gas that remains today is just a shadow of what it was in 2021. At its peak, Russia exported around 140 billion cubic meters of gas to the EU each year. Now we're talking about only 4 to 5 billion through pipelines and around 20 billion in liquefied form, which is far less. But we must note, this isn't really Europe's achievement, it's Russia's, because the harshest sanctions against Russia were introduced by Russia itself. It wasn't Europe that stopped buying gas from Russia. It was Russia that stopped selling it. The biggest enemy of Gazprom is Putin. The very idea of an energy superpower has proven absurd. We no longer live in the 1950s, when gas moved only through fixed pipelines. Today, a global LNG market connects producers and buyers across continents. If you need gas, you can get it from the United States, Canada, the Persian Gulf, or North Africa. Tankers will deliver it straight to your port, no matter where you are. Pipeline gas still matters for Hungary and Slovakia, but only because of their own inertia and unwillingness to adapt. Right next to them, the Czech Republic and Austria have already stopped purchasing Russian gas and now easily draw supplies from Norway, routed through Germany and Poland. Gas also flows from the Balkans and Italy, and large LNG terminals operate on the Adriatic coast, including in Croatia.
Across the continent, nations are racing to diversify their energy sources. Yet Russian oil, gas, and LNG still fuel Europe's economy. Analysts predict that in 2025, Russia could earn more than 200 billion euros from energy and raw material exports, and about 20 billion of that will come straight from the EU. It's a paradox. Europe pays the Kremlin more for fuel than it spends supporting Ukraine's defense. Turkey, a NATO member, has imported over 90 billion pounds worth of Russian energy since 2022. Meanwhile, China and India remain Moscow's biggest customers.
Targeting Russia's shadow tanker fleet is one of the most effective ways to hit its economy. The gas industry is already running at a loss and survives only on state subsidies. Pipelines can't just be shut down. Some workers can be laid off, but most must stay to keep gas flowing inside Russia and maintain this massive system. Oil still brings Russia profit, but refining is already on the verge of becoming unprofitable. The so-called shadow tanker fleet has become the main channel for spreading Russia's second addiction, oil. That's exactly where the pressure must be applied. But will that be enough? Not entirely. It's just one part of the strategy. To truly cut Moscow off, other producers have to increase their output so that global markets can replace Russian oil. We're already seeing this shift. OPEC countries have started ramping up production after a series of new agreements and negotiations. If Russia's oil industry crosses into the red, it won't just mean tightening belts. It will mean the Kremlin having to subsidize yet another sector. And that raises a bigger question. Where would those subsidies come from when the rest of the economy is already bleeding?
Through its REPowerEU plan, the European Commission set a roadmap to cut energy ties with Russia by 2027. Starting in early 2026, no new gas contracts can be signed. By the end of 2027, every long-term agreement, oil, gas, and LNG, must be terminated.
From 2027 to 2028, not only should a new calendar year begin, a new era must begin as well. An era in which the replacement of Russian gas is complete, and Europe enters the age of zero dependence on Russian energy. From the Ukrainian perspective, such timeframes, 1 year, 2 years, 5 years ahead, may sound almost blasphemous. After all, Ukraine is in the very heart of the Russo-Ukrainian war, where missiles still fall daily, yet it's hard to blame Europe for its gradual pace. The level of dependency was immense, and unlike Ukrainians, Europeans don't live under bombardment. Their voters may not be ready to pay higher energy bills in exchange for moral clarity. When bombs aren't falling on your city, danger feels abstract, distant, something that happens to others. That's exactly what Moscow was counting on. In the winter of 2021 to 2022, just before launching its full-scale invasion, Russia waged what many in Europe called a cold Omor, an artificial winter famine. Gas prices didn't just rise, they exploded, soaring tens of times higher. It was a calculated move to freeze Europe into submission, to break public resolve and weaken support for Ukraine. But that plan backfired. Europe endured, and the Kremlin lost one of its most powerful weapons.
Europe has also tightened sanctions. Brussels approved its 19th package, extending restrictions on oil and liquefied natural gas. More than 100 tankers caught transporting Russian oil illegally were blacklisted, raising the total to 550 vessels under sanctions.
Sending today a very clear signal. No longer will we allow Russia to weaponize energy against us. No longer will we accept being dependent on energy from an aggressor. And no longer will we help indirectly finance Putin's war against Ukraine. Now, it's been important for me and the Commission, of course, to be as helpful as possible. And I am very confident that the work we've done has proven effective.
The Kremlin is trying to offset its losses through new gas deals with China. With the European market gone, Moscow is now looking east for a lifeline. In early September, after years of talks, Beijing finally agreed to build the Power of Siberia 2 pipeline. But for Russia, the project offers little real financial gain.
In relations between Russia and China, such a large dependence of seller on buyer actually produces dependence of the seller, not the buyer. China can buy gas elsewhere, and it does. China is actively expanding ties with Central Asia, laying pipelines from Pakistan, importing gas by sea, and acquiring liquefied natural gas from a variety of sources while deepening relations with Arab suppliers. Russia, by contrast, has only a handful of pipeline projects. There is the existing Power of Siberia 1, the planned Power of Siberia 2, and a few others. And at the far end of these pipes sits a single buyer, that old dismissive 20th century label, raw materials appendage, turns out to be much closer to the truth than the fashionable but fictitious term energy superpower, because the latter simply does not hold up.
Meanwhile, the United States, under a second Donald Trump administration, imposed sweeping sanctions on Russian energy giants, Rosneft and Lukoil. Soon after, China's largest state-owned oil companies suspended maritime purchases of Russian crude.
What's striking is that even China isn't coming to Russia's rescue on energy. Beijing is taking advantage of Moscow's weakness, setting its own terms. It agrees to buy Russian gas, but only at China's low domestic prices. It agrees to sell refined oil products back to Russia, but strictly at global market rates. So even the Kremlin's supposed ally is using the crisis to its benefit. Meanwhile, a whole belt of countries that once depended on Russian energy, not just in Europe but across Central Asia, is steadily pulling away. The old energy needle that kept them tied to Moscow no longer works. Russia's geopolitical gravity is fading, shrinking in step with its military and energy power. And if that erosion continues, the Russia we see today won't survive in its current form.
Russia's strikes on Ukraine's energy infrastructure have opened another front in its ongoing war for resources. The Kremlin is trying to inflict maximum damage on Ukraine's gas network ahead of winter. According to Bloomberg, Russian attacks in September and October 2025 destroyed more than half of Ukraine's domestic gas production. The heaviest strikes came on October 3rd, when massive bombardments hit Kharkiv and Poltava regions, knocking out about 60% of output. These direct attacks on Ukraine also threaten Europe. The continent's energy system stretches across thousands of kilometers of undersea and onshore gas pipelines, power cables, LNG terminals, substations, offshore oil and gas fields, and renewable energy farms. And it now seems clear that the Kremlin is preparing to expand its sabotage operations across the European Union.
Across Europe, Moscow applies a tactic of 1,000 cuts. Many analysts, politicians, and military leaders now say this: when drones, planes, sabotage at military factories, political killings, or poison appear, do not respond in kind. If the threat does not hit you directly, do not escalate. Hold back, show restraint, avoid giving Moscow an excuse. Russia understands this perfectly and plans to exploit it. Drones come without explosives, so they can be dismissed as nuisance flights. Planes fly routes that let Moscow claim they were in international airspace. Assassinations are staged to leave no clear proof and no smoking gun. Each incident raises questions, sows doubt, and drains political will. All these measures aim to freeze any decisive reaction and stretch Western resolve thin. Inside each country, governments grow nervous, public debate fractures, and leaders hesitate to act. Radical views are rising across the spectrum, left and right, and on those flanks, pro-Russian forces are ready to influence elections. They push narratives, fund sympathetic groups, and amplify divisive messages online and offline. At the same time, public fear grows, and a strong pacifist current urges restraint, arguing we must not provoke war, even if that means yielding to Moscow. Opposite them, alarmists demand immediate self-arming, arguing Russia is already here and we should stop sending help to Ukraine. Hardline anti-Russian slogans spread quickly, sharpening disagreements between states. Some leaders call to shoot down intruders, others warn against escalation, and those debates open new fault lines inside Western societies. This is a tactic Moscow has used before, stoking language, church, and identity disputes to weaken Ukraine from within. Across history, Russia has shown a grim talent. It turns nearly every division into a weapon.
Russia has shown a clear pattern in its behavior, a deliberate, methodical use of the escalation ladder. If Moscow takes a hostile step and faces no consequences, the next strike grows stronger. Not drastically, but by several incremental degrees, step by step, never skipping a rung. For the past 3 years, Shahed drones have been crossing into EU airspace, and not a single one has been shot down, allegedly by accident. Russia violates airspace, territorial waters, severs communication cables, and yet there's been no real response. Given this record, the next logical move seems obvious. If cables have already been cut, it's only a matter of time before attacks target undersea gas pipelines. That's why freeing Europe from Russian energy dependence has two crucial dimensions. First, it deprives the Kremlin of money for its war, and second, it strips Moscow of leverage over other nations. Russian energy in Europe has already declined sharply. Yes, it still exists, but much less than before, and that's progress. This is a process that must continue until a complete ban is achieved. Because beyond political and economic arguments, there's also a moral one. When some EU states continue buying Russian energy while simultaneously providing aid to Ukraine, and often spending more on Russian fuel than they give to Kiev, the contradiction becomes glaring. This doublethink, this helping both sides mentality, corrodes both public and political consciousness. In France, Belgium, Germany, and Spain, many understand, consciously or not, that they are deceiving themselves and others, and one moral compromise leads to another. It starts a chain reaction. a slow erosion of moral and political norms that eats away at Europe from within. That is the third reason why Europe must fully abandon Russian energy, to stop this inner decay and end the hypocrisy.
Moscow is still trying to fracture Europe's unity because unity is what truly threatens the Kremlin. Solidarity is what drives the European Union toward full energy independence, and with it, freedom from Moscow's grip. Not long ago, Russia blackmailed Europe with oil and gas. Those days are over. Putin's so-called energy weapon has turned against him, weakening Russia itself and revealing its real place in the world, on the far side of a new Iron Curtain, behind which lie nothing but empty pipelines.